If you're looking for a better way to test your automations before you set them live within your business, then the chances are you probably need to take a look at some of the different testing methods you can use to properly test your automations just to make sure everything is good before you set it live and let it affect your business, your clients, and everything else involved. I'm Patrick with Univium, a business automation development company. And despite my terrible handwriting, I still purchased a whiteboard to help me make videos. And so today we're going to be going over the different testing types to test your automations. First up, we have the smoke test. And I'm just going to read these definitions off verbatim just to make sure I don't miss anything. Smoke test is a lightning fast check using one real record to confirm basic functionality. And so that's one where if you have an automation that maybe just affects, one or two small records within your system, let's say you're using a CRM and the automation is only going to affect one contact in particular, well, then you can set the automation up to only run for one contact, test it for that one record, and you don't have to worry about it affecting the rest of your database. You can set up a test contact. It'll just, affect that one record. And that's a very common one, especially for smaller automations, is just a really quick smoke test. And it's definitely one of the best for the smaller, simpler automations. The next up, we have the Sandbox Test, which is a full workflow that runs in a replica of your real system. Now, this is one of the testing methods that's probably the most time intensive, at least from my experience. And that is because you have to set up an entire new replica of your existing system in a way that it doesn't affect your actual live system. And the reason for that is typically you do a sandbox test with more complex automations that maybe affect a large number of your automations or a large number of your records within your system or database. And so that's why, because it's complex, there's a lot more unknowns as to what's going to go wrong. It could affect a lot more of your data within your system. And so you want to do a sandbox test to make sure that everything checks out. I'm trying to think of an example in which I've done this before. I think I built an automation that would send out notifications every single day for clients' contracts if their contract was coming up. This was for a contracting company. They had contracts that lasted for 30 days, and if a contract was coming up and was about to expire, it would send out a notification saying your contract's about to expire. Do you want to renew? And given the nature of that particular company, it was so complex that there were a lot of different things that could go wrong, that could be unforeseen, not just if the automation was built incorrectly, but also if the data was incorrect. A client might get a notification that they didn't want them to get for, just good customer service reasons. And so in that instance, we used a sandbox test. I think we set up just a couple hours for them to go in and review the mock data, make sure that the notifications that would have got sent out were actually the ones that we would have wanted to have sent out. And we actually ended up catching some instances where the automation needed to be tweaked and also some data governance cleanup we had to do that we didn't realize before. So sandbox test is definitely very time intensive, definitely takes a lot more effort, but can be useful in the instances with those more complex automations and whatnot. So next up, we have production with safeguards, and this is where you launch in the live system, but with safety checks. And so this is somewhat similar to a smoke test. And I'm trying to think of the best instance that I've done this in. I want to say there was one time where I set up, again, this was an email automation that was just going to be running. We didn't have time to test it we didn't have time to set up a sandbox test, although it was one I really would have liked to, but due to time constraints, we didn't have time. So I just did my absolute best to set it up with the production data in the database. But I set a limit. I said, hey, let's not start sending out, hundreds or thousands of emails every day. Let's just start off sending 20 emails per day based off the data that's available. Set a safeguard so we don't send a bunch. Let's wait until we have some feedback from those instances we're testing. So essentially, it was kind of letting the clients test because they would respond every now and then if they're like, "Hey, I wasn't supposed to get this email." And then from there, after we make the adjustments, then we'll set it where it can send out more per day. So production with safeguards is definitely good. If you need to do a sandbox test, but you're kind of short on time, then I would definitely recommend doing production with safeguards. And then last but not least, we have UAT testing. And UAT stands for user accepting testing, but user acceptance testing. And this is kind of an instance where it probably doesn't have as much of a negative, it can't really have a negative impact on the business per se, but maybe it's a question of whether or not the automation is fully functional, works as intended. And so to kind of give an example of this, again, I'd say it probably sounds very similar to smoke test or production with safeguards, but it is different. I built an automation where, we had some events, and then after the event, we'd press a button to tag everyone inside a different platform. It was again, I guess I do a lot of email stuff, don't I? It was a email marketing platform. You'd press a button in Airtable, it would tag them in the email marketing platform and create a broadcast to send out an email to all those people. But it didn't actually send out the email because they had to prep it first. All they had to do was create the thing, and if it didn't work, you could always just repress the button and do it again. And so it wasn't. It didn't have anything that wasn't reversible. It was easily reversible, and so in that instance, we just did it in production, and once it was good to go, we either received feedback to say like, "Hey, can you tweak it with this, tweak it with that," or we received feedback saying, "Hey, if this is good to go, go ahead and release it into production." So, anyways, those are four very common testing types that I use a lot with my clients whenever we're releasing an automation into their small business. And so, hopefully, you found that helpful. There are other testing types I might go over in another video, but for now, I'd say these are probably pretty good to start off with. And as always, if you need any assistance with automation in your small business, definitely reach out to us. My automation company, Univium, can most likely help you. And so just go to univium.com. I'll leave a link in the description, and we'd love to hear from you. And also, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe on YouTube to stay up to date with all the latest automation and AI trends. Thank you very much. Take care.